I love that little bit of autotune. I don't know why. It's bouncy. It's fun. Shit, I've got a bit of. Yeah, that's what was wrong. All right. Shouldn't be any background noise. Everything looks to be good. Hello, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. Is something wrong with my stream? I can't tell if anything's. I can't tell if it's working or not. This is really weird. It says I'm connected, but I can't see my chats. How retarded is that? Okay, well, I'm gonna have to hurry up, please. There we go. Alright, now I've got my side chats. Awesome. So sorry, everyone. So today we're gonna do something a little bit different than I usually do. I haven't actually watched the Helsinki summit yet, and I thought instead of watching it all, making you all wait till tomorrow for a video or a stream about it, I would just instead watch it with you and give you my comments off the cuff as shit's happening. And I thought that would be fun, so that's what we're going to do. But before we do that, I do want to talk to you guys about one very important subject, and that subject is Iran. Now, for those of you who don't know, Iran has been under protests and riots for, well, months, to be completely honest. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard is completely failing to stop the protests and action demanding Iranian regime change. And there's a lot of hope right now that the mullahs are going to fall entirely without the influence of other countries. That the people themselves are going to rise up and take out the mullahs. Now, there's one really fascinating thing that happened yesterday that I think you all should see. This is from a man named Hashmat Alavi, who is doing some amazing reporting out in Iran, as well as covering Iraq and Yemen. And what we have here, this picture, this is a picture of a 4-star general's field uniform, folded up neatly, with a resignation letter laid out on top of it. The people in the army ground forces in Iran are quitting, they're resigning, and they're supporting the people instead. We only had one. I'm sorry. We only had one to start with, but then more pictures started coming out. I'm not sure what rank this is offhand, but this is a Desert Ground Forces uniform. Then we have their dress blues. This is a fine uniform with two stars, and we also have a ground soldier. You'll see that they're also including some of them are also including their ID badge. All of them have these hashtags are the Iranian regime change and Iranian protest hashtags included on their resignation letters. This is even here. It's hard to see, but even here you can see these people are supporting the people of Iran. They are leaving the military and leaving their support for the military entirely to instead deal with and help the people of Iran overthrow the mullahs. Now, this is a complicated matter. It's still extremely unknown what is going to happen because, well, simply put, you will be killed if you speak up about the parliament in exile or show any sort of support for the parliament in exile in Iran. And this is a huge problem. So if there is a solution to be had right now, it's very difficult to know what it's going to be. However, we do have an idea of what it's going to be, at least from an international observer standpoint. So I wanted to just explain this to you right quick and get some of this information out there, because most people don't realize that there is a parliament in exile that desires to represent Iran. It's called the NCRI, or the National Council of Resistance in Iran, and it is a 550-member parliament, give or take 550 people, who are actively working on a constant basis to put forth resolutions to the UN, put forth resolutions acting as the parliament in exile. And it's pretty impressive. We're not talking about a theocratic monarchy that happens to look like a parliament. No, we're talking about an organization that desires to be completely secular in government, execute a separation of church and state within a new constitution for Iran, provide the grounds for a multi-party system. They would be giving suffrage to women and non-landowners. Well, they'd be giving suffrage to everyone, but they market that they'd be giving suffrage to women. It would be a secular government that recognizes the religious nature of Iran. It's pretty fascinating. Now, there are 4 or 5 parties that I know of in the parliament in exile, in the NCR, and I wanted to just run through those right quick for you. We don't know a lot about them. Some of them, we haven't heard anything new from them since 2016. People are terrified to speak up. People are terrified to meet because they could be killed, and killed en masse should they do so. The largest party is the People's Mujahideen Organization of Iran. Now, when you hear Mujahideen, that's a pretty fucking scary term for an American. But I want you to recognize that a number of people on the left and the right in America support the People's Mujahideen. It's impressive because, yes, they are a religious organization, but they're a religious organization that has distinctly drawn a line between church and state in the last 30 years. They've evolved greatly, and while their origins are a strong Islamist Marxist background, from everything I've looked into so far, they really have evolved into a very left-wing liberal Democrat organization. Now, I know some of you have reservations about the left wing, as do I, but when it comes to Iran, we need to reserve judgment on these parties and these people. Our involvement in propping up the Shah of Iran and then allowing the Shah to be overthrown in violent coup is something the Iranian people hate us for. Now, they don't hate us as much as they hate the mullahs right now, hands down. But just as President Trump is doing, we need to take a very hands-off approach to Iran right now. We need to let them do their own thing. And I accent this entirely for the reason that we don't have enough information to speak about what's going on in Iran, what these people want. What we know about the People's Mujahideen is it could be entirely inaccurate. We could be getting the smallest, most biased late 80s, early 90s understandings of the people of Iran and not getting information that is new. I mean, we're talking about a group that wants a non nuclear Iran, an Iran that has women's rights, that has uh, uh, very progressive grounds to present themselves from. And you know my opinion on that, but going from a theocracy, anything is better than that, especially if they have a parliament. So the other three parties that we have, there's a center-left party that is the Kurdistani, I'm sorry, not the Kurdistani, the National Democratic Front. They're a center-left party, and they can be put on par with Sweden's National Democrats, who I've spoken of before, or England's Liberal Party. I believe they're called the Libs, right? I'm sorry, I'm getting all different political organizations confused right now. I'm pretty sure they're called the Libs in England. If I'm mistaken, please let me know in the chats. But then we also have they're center left. Their ideology is liberal. They're progressives, certainly, but they're not Marxist Leninists. That honor goes to the Labor Party of Iran, who are declaredly Marxist Leninist even to this day. Now, the latest reports that I can find about the Labor Party in Iran date back to 2013, so I don't know what their policies are currently. But it's safe to say that there is a distinctly Marxist-Leninist movement within Iran. However, it's not very large. It's pretty fucking small. They don't represent any sort of majority like the National Democratic Front or the People's Mujahideen represents. And then finally, we have the Kurdistani Democratic Party, Kurdistani National. I'm sorry, I just spaced on it. The Kurdistani Democratic Party of Iran, or the Democratic Party of Kurdistani Iran, depending who you ask. And these are, again, these are Kurdistani, so they are pretty far left. But they're also very forgiving and willing to work with the parliament in exile as a whole, and their greatest interest is separatism or autonomy within Iran. So there are many distinct working, and these are just the largest parties, mind you. So there's certainly a left-leaning bent, but there does seem to be balance in that left-leaning bent, and a number of parties that at one point were superbly far left-leaning have become far more center-left to centrist over time. And I have strong hopes that we're going to see a broad diversity of opinions and thoughts in this parliament in exile. Sorry about the air conditioner kicking on. I can't do much about that. If you can hear it in the background, I apologize. But this is where Iran is now. The army is defecting to support the people. The parliament in exile is starting to gain support again verbally from groups in Europe. Not now, Amnesty International hasn't addressed this at all so far, so it's kind of concerning that that's the case. But the more we talk about Iran, even if I'm dead wrong about the NCRI, and if I am, I hope you can let me know. The sooner we get more dialogue going on this subject, the more we can understand about Iran. Anyway, I'm sorry to go on about that. I just thought it was extremely important to cover. Now we're going to move on to the main events, which is, of course, Putin and Trump at the press conference following the summits. Now, there is a logo behind me, which is why I'm positioned where I am. Shit, 1 second. I need to pull up a... Well, I'm going to have to be very careful because I don't have a second monitor right now to use for a prompter to read the transcript. So I'm going to have to be paying very close attention to what these men are saying in order to get the information that I need. And as we go through this, I'm just going to be commenting on things that are said because I think there's a lot of interesting things being said.
Of individual words to keep from misimpressions.
They're both in a room now.
How's the volume?
Спасибо большое.
Okay, I need to turn this up a little bit.
Мы можем начать работать, так я понимаю. Уважаемый господин президент, дамы и господа.
I'm going to turn this up just a little bit more. All right.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Переговоры с президентом Соединенных Штатов Америки,
negotiations with the President of the United States, Donald Trump, took place in a frank and business-like atmosphere. I think we can call it a success and a very fruitful round of negotiations. We carefully analyzed the current status, the present and the future of the Russia-United States relationship, key issues of the global agenda. It's quite clear to everyone that the bilateral relationship are going through a complicated stage, and yet those impediments, the current tension, the tense atmosphere, essentially have no solid reason behind it. The Cold War is a thing of past.
That's really fascinating to have said by President Putin. I'm interested in that. Hold on.
Era of acute ideological confrontation of the two countries is a thing of the remote past, is a vestige of the past. The situation in the world changed dramatically. Today, both Russia and the United States face a whole new set of challenges. Those include a dangerous maladjustment of mechanisms for maintaining international security and stability.
Huh. Hold on. Let me check my... I can't. Shit. Okay. A dangerous maladjustment in systems and securities. I'm probably getting the quote wrong, but what he just said is absolutely amazing. Putin just admitted that the systems in place, the structures and operations which have existed for more than 30 years as a vestigial leftover from the Cold War are a maladjustment. He's admitting that they are it's completely unnecessary for us to be playing spy versus spy. He literally just admitted that. I mean, when I woke up this morning, people on Twitter were losing their fucking shit. Talking, I mean, when you click on the Putin in the trending box on Twitter, everyone was losing it. Trump capitulated. Putin right here just admitted to the one thing every one of us, regardless of what side of the argument you're on, needed to hear him admit. That he has systems in place that have existed for even longer than he's ever been in power. Or even been in power, rather. Are a maladjustment. A maladjustment. They're a cancer. They're doing far more harm than good. And he recognizes this. Yes, it was put into very, well, political language, to say the least, for Russian, but even acknowledging that is a huge step in the right direction. I'm amazed. I am genuinely amazed by this.
Regional crises, the creeping threats of terrorism and transnational crime. It's the snowballing problems in the economy, environmental risks, and other sets of challenges. We can only cope with these challenges if we join the ranks and work together. Hopefully, we will reach this understanding with our American partners. Today's negotiations reflect our joint wish with President Trump to...
He said, hopefully we can come to an agreement, which means we are not at the end of these negotiations. That's a very important detail. This is, as far as I can tell, just the beginning of what's going to be a long negotiating process between the US and Russia. I'll be honest, I'm glad Russia's not just turning over and dying. We need more than one superpower in the world willing to play hard negotiations. I'm not saying, and we know Trump is a hard-ass negotiator and gets what he wants. Look at the news coming out of England and Europe over the last week, if you want evidence of that. Trump goes in there and he puts everyone on the spot saying, you're not paying your fair share of 2% of GDP into NATO. You need to be paying your part. And what happens? Countries immediately begin upping the amount they're paying towards 2%, if not more. We're going to be seeing European nations putting up to 4% in at this point because of Trump's powerful and blunt negotiating tactics. Now that technique, Russians see that as arrogance. I understand this very personally, having negotiated with someone I love. But you can't, that doesn't mean you don't do it. You have to be unmoving when speaking to Russians. In negotiation, that is. You have to show them that you have no fear. Putin is admitting that these negotiations to solve problems of economic, terroristic, ecological, and transnational criminal problems will only be defeated. They will only get worse if we focus on maintaining a system of ancient Cold War style tactics in which our spy agencies fuck with and spy on their government and their elections, and their spy agencies fuck with and interfere with and spy on our government and agencies. This is brilliant. This is absolutely brilliant to see from Putin.
To redress this negative situation in the bilateral relationship, outline the first steps for improving this relationship to restore the acceptable level of trust and going back to the previous level of interaction on all mutual interest issues. As major nuclear powers, we bear special responsibility for maintaining international security. And it is vital, and we mentioned this during the negotiations, it's crucial that we fine-tune the dialogue on strategic stability and global security and non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. We submitted our American colleagues and
non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. That is a slight nod to Iran. An Iran that is currently embroiled, as I explained before, in what is the beginnings of a new revolution, but one that it's very difficult to tell what regime change will come from it. We have a lot that needs to be considered in all of these things. Yes, everyone is a spy or a bot, and Putin does look tiny next to Trump. It is kind of funny. I noticed that in a picture of him before that came out yesterday or the day before. Trump was standing next to Putin, and I realized, holy shit. I mean, Donald Trump's a pretty tall man, but God, he makes Putin look tiny in comparison.
Note with a number of specific suggestions. We believe it necessary to work together further on to interact on the disarmament agenda, military and technical cooperation. This includes the extension of the Strategic Offensive Arms Limitation Treaty. It's the dangerous situation with the global American anti-missile defense system. It's the implementation issues with the INF Treaty.
Cooperation. He listed off a few of the post-1988 the post-1988 military solutions to mutually assured destruction, such as the missile defense sphere. Basically, any missile that is fired from Russia heading over the North Pole, heading over either of the oceans, will be shot down by an intercept missile, as well as tracked by airborne units which exist tracking the country. But now we're talking about cooperation on this program. Cooperation would mean that the United States and Russia would work together with each of their own missile defense systems to prevent other countries like, say, I don't know, North Korea or Iran or Pakistan from ever getting a nuclear missile into the air toward its own targets. This would be a strong, cooperative, preventative measure that would take mutually assured destruction far past its end into something far more important. A world in which the nuclear superpowers have nuclear weapons, so that the destruction of nuclear weapons on each side happens in a balanced manner and in a very slow manner, because it has to happen that way. You can be as hippie as you want and say that we should just get rid of all our nuclear weapons, but if we got rid of all our nuclear weapons, Russia could destroy us. And the wrong thing happens, they will destroy us. We need them as long as Russia has theirs. But if we're cooperating with them to assure that no other nation is able to have that kind of utterly world-shaping and destroying power, this means that these weapons will slowly become obsolete as technology advances. They'll become more meaningless in a growingly automated world. And instead, we will use the launch capabilities that we have for these weapons to instead solve the problem of rogue nations wishing to use a nuclear weapon as a weapon of terror on those that they see as their oppressors, those that they see as an aristocracy that has their foot down on them, whether that may be true or not. Again, in this case, I'm speaking about Pakistan specifically and their relationship with India. Not many people have been talking about Pakistan and India recently, but every couple weeks, every couple months, you can see on satellites 40,000 people from Pakistan moving towards the border of India, India freaking out and moving 40,000 people towards the border of Pakistan, and then Pakistan warming up its shitty fucking silos. And the Department of State and the Russian and the Kremlin and and China, all of these organizations have to step in and say, hey, fucking stop it. Slow this shit down. We get that they started it. We get that the other side started it. We get that you feel like you have a reason. But that is not a reason to destroy the stability of the known world right now. It's not perfect. It's absolutely not perfect, and I recognize this. The League of Nations is evidence of the imperfection. But there is something that can be done on a technological level, and that is shooting down fucking missiles. Working together as the two greatest superpowers in the world right now to assure that even if these countries have to get into conflict, it will be a conventional conflict that does not destabilize everything west of it, does not destabilize Afghanistan, does not destabilize Iran, does not destabilize or bring in Saudi Arabia.
And of course, the agenda of non-placement of weapons in space.
Okay. That's something that Putin got from Trump. That's actually really interesting. That last bit there, he said, the non-placement of weapons in space. It's pretty vague what he's describing there, right? He was talking about non-proliferation. He's talking about nuclear armaments. And then he says the non-placement of weapons in space. That can mean one of two things. That could mean any weapons. That could mean nuclear weapons. And this comes not very long after Trump designated the sixth branch of the American military, the Space Force, which means that Putin has a negotiating position now, saying, at least that's how it looks from listening, that we're not going to put nuclear weapons in space. And by we, I mean both America and Russia. That's huge. That is huge.
We favor the continued cooperation in counterterrorism and maintaining cybersecurity. And I'd like to point out specifically that our special services are cooperating quite successfully together. The most recent example is their operational cooperation within the recently concluded World Football Cup.
That's interesting. That's an interesting thing to bring up. The intelligence community in America and the intelligence community in Russia cooperated to assure the security of the World Cup. I want you guys to think back to Sochi, the Olympics in 2014. That was a security nightmare. We were getting reports of huge problems of security in which people were breaking in, people were rushing out into the fields. We had protesters killed, if I recall correctly. And now we have intelligence communities cooperating to assure the safe and stable progress, movement forward through the World Cup. That is, I mean, that's one thing that I was looking for a lot in the news recently. Throughout the World Cup, I was waiting for security stories to come out of protesters being jailed or protests getting extremely out of hand in Russia, but that wasn't the case. Now, for those of you who don't know, intelligence communities and police communities, like the FBI, like the organizations in the Kremlin, like the military police in Brazil just, what was it, a year ago. All of these groups will share information about activists and violent activists heading into a World Cup or a soccer game, football for all you out there. And this will absolutely lead to better control of the situation, because the most violent football hooligans will be stopped when entering the stadium. Now, do I agree with that on a principle level? No, I really fucking don't. But at the same time, it has brought the desired results that Trump and Putin want in this situation. Law and order. Peaceful protests did take place, but they weren't a problem for people who weren't taking part in them. That's enormous.
In general, the contacts among the special services should be put to a system-wide basis, should be brought to a systemic framework. I reminded President Trump.
Hold on.
Among the special services should be put to a system-wide basis, should be brought to a systemic framework.
He's stuttering there. He says a system-wide basis put to a systemic framework. He's hunting for the right way to frame those words. That I find interesting. What he's implying there, at least the impression I get, is that new structures are needed to support the interaction and communication of the intelligence communities all across the world, but especially between the US and Russia. That's not something that exists right now. In order for the system that exists for intelligence communities between the United States, England, and the other Commonwealth and Five Eyes nations is a system of cooperation that has a lot of flaws. And that actually sounds kind of dangerous to me. It's intimidating. It's upsetting, and I don't know where he's going with that, so I'm going to have to look into that and get back to you. But if a basic system of cooperative interaction is set forth, that would reduce a lot of the he said, she said bullshit intelligence communities suffer from.
And reminded President Trump about the suggestion to re-establish the working group on anti-terrorism. We also mentioned a plethora of regional crises. It's not always that our postures dovetail exactly, and yet the overlapping and mutual interests abound. We have to look for points of contact and interact closer in a variety of international fora. Clearly, we mentioned the regional crisis. For instance, Syria. As far as Syria is concerned, the task of establishing peace and reconciliation in this country could be the first showcase example of the successful joint work.
I absolutely agree with Putin here. Syria is an amazing example of joint communication and operations. It wasn't without flaw. It wasn't without shortcoming. We did kill 8 or 10 Russians. Actually, it might have been more than that. Don't quote me on that number. But we did kill a number of Russians in a Saudi base. I want to say it was 4 months ago or so. It might have been longer ago. You know me, my memory is absolute shit when it comes to anything that isn't actively being studied or within the last week. But Syria is absolutely a powerful example of what can happen when the US and Russia work together as friends. Not, temporary allies in a greater, more complicated world. And this is the impression they're giving me.
Russia and the United States apparently can act proactively and assume the leadership in this issue and organize the interaction to overcome humanitarian crisis and help Syrian refugees to go back to their homes. In order to accomplish this level of successful cooperation in Syria, we have all the required components. Let me remind you that both Russian and American military acquired a useful experience of coordination of their action, established the operational channels of communication, which permitted to avoid dangerous incidents and unintentional collisions in the air and in the ground. Also, crushing terrorists in the southwest of Syria, the south of Syria, should be brought to the full compliance with the Treaty of 1974 about the separation of forces, of Israel and Syria. This will bring peace to Golan Heights.
Okay, so that was actually really hard for the translator to get through. I was able to pick up just enough to realize what he was saying was we need to enforce the Separation of Forces Treaty of 1974 to assure that the Golan Heights remains a buffer zone between Syria and Israel. He's saying that Israel needs to be held to account and Russia needs to be held to account. And Syria needs to be held to account to make sure that the Golan Heights mountain range acts as an enormous buffer zone, and that Syria isn't launching planes and drones into Israel, and that Israel isn't launching planes and drones into Syria. There's an interesting reason that this comes up. Just the other day, Israel came out and just openly admitted that that they bombed a site in Syria in response to drones being intercepted flying into Israeli airspace. What's weird about that is the fact that this is not something Israel ever does. Which means Israel is coming right out and being open with their military actions for the first time in God's 40, 50 so years? 50, give or take about 50 years. This is the first time they're being transparent. And it's because even Israel understands that they can't fuck with the US and Russia, and that they can't get away with war crimes when the situation is being handled and addressed. I also think that it says something about the nature of what's going on with Iran, because Iran has put all of their money into winning a terrorist-based war in Syria and failed miserably. And at this point, Israel can come out and say, look, the Iranian forces in Syria are attacking us. We are responding with proportional force. We stopped. We let you know it happened. Please stop these fuckers from bombing our synagogues. Because that's all they fucking want. That's all Israel wants at this point. They want the synagogues to go without being bombed. 5 days ago, a synagogue was bombed. So just keep that in mind.
and bring a more peaceful relationship between Syria and Israel, and also to provide security of the State of Israel. Mr. President paid special attention to the issue during today's negotiations, and I would like to confirm that Russia is interested in this development and this will act accordingly. Thus far, we will make a step toward creating a lasting peace in compliance with the respective resolutions of Security Council, for instance, the resolution 338. We're glad that the Korean Peninsula issue is starting to resolve. To a great extent, it was possible thanks to the personal engagement of President Trump, who opted for dialogue instead of confrontation.
That's amazing. Putin just praised Trump for the Korean Peninsula situation. This is Putin acknowledging, and Putin has much better access as far as spies go to those in the Korean Peninsula than the Americans do. After all, the Korean Peninsula is hanging the fuck off of China, and has a bit of border with Russia. That little bit of border is all it takes for Russia to get its spies in there. Now, there hasn't been a test missile launch in like 4 fucking months. While people are, quick to point out that there's no, that we are seeing no good, we're not seeing the destruction of nuclear weapons, that we're not seeing what they would want immediately seen. We are seeing change. The powers of the world are seeing change. Kim might be a little bit argumentative, but he has to be. He has to show the Korean people that he is a strong person, that he's not capitulating. There's a strong concept when it comes to Korea that I think most people ignore. And it's not just Korea. China, it has the same thing. You have to be able to save face. You cannot be publicly dishonored. And Trump recognizes this. His negotiating policy and practice is adjusted when dealing with Korea, with the Koreas, to be peaceable, kind, to show a willingness to appear respectful when dealing with Kim Jong-un. Now, behind closed doors, I have no doubt that President Trump is just as hard a negotiator that he is in a boardroom. But when it comes to public announcements, he's respectful and he acknowledges what Kim has openly given him and the world, and makes statements like, I have full faith that Kim will do the right thing. Or not the right thing, will do what is needed. He allows Kim Jong-un to save face while doing the right thing. And here's Putin acknowledging that Trump did that Trump de-escalated a 70-year-long conflict on the Korean Peninsula that no one else has been able to save.
So mentioned our concern about the withdrawal of the United States from the JCPOA. Well, our U.S. counterparts are aware of our posture. Let me remind you that thanks to the Iranian nuclear deal, Iran became the most controlled country in the world. It's submitted to the control of IAEA. It effectively ensures the exclusively peaceful nature of Iranian nuclear program and strengthens the non-proliferation regime. While we discussed the internal Ukrainian crisis, we paid special attention to the bona fide implementation of Minsk agreements by Kiev. At the same time, the United States could be more decisive in nudging the Ukrainian leadership and encourage it to work actively in this.
Okay, so he's talking about denuclearization of Ukraine here. This is not actually something I know a ton about. I need to do more research on it. But it's kind of up in the air. Clearly, Putin is actually right here saying, this is something that I disagree with the president on. And he has every right to do so. The president is very much against broad, sweeping, multi-party deals that don't benefit the United States in any way or act as a loss service to the United States. Which means this is going to be a point on which Putin and Trump directly butt heads. Good. They should butt heads on this. This is something that needs to be negotiated and debated hotly as much as possible by both parties so that we can reach the best solution for everyone involved. And by everyone involved, I mean the Ukrainian people.
Paid more attention to economic ties and economic cooperation. It's clear that both countries, the businesses of both countries are interested in this. American delegation was one of the largest delegations on the St. Petersburg Economic Forum. It featured over 500 representatives of American businesses. We agreed, in President Trump, we agreed to create a high-level working group that would bring together captains of Russian and American business. After all, entrepreneurs and businessmen know better how to articulate this successful business cooperation. We'll let them think and make their proposals and suggestions in this regard.
Did you hear that, though? Despite this being something that Putin disagrees with Trump about, he is actively acknowledging Trump's expertise as a businessman and what that brings to the table in such negotiations. Trump is, people are saying that Putin won this. God, no. Anyone who tells you that this is, more evidence of collusion, which, mind you, the Rosenstein report, plain and simple words, no collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia for his election. No collusion whatsoever. So that is completely disproven by a man, Rod Rosenstein, who is not a popular man with either party right now. So take what you will from that, but Putin is praising Donald Trump. He's doing it with generally flat, very Russian affects. But if you're watching his body language, the very subtle hints, he respects Trump. He has a respect for Trump. Now, I haven't been watching Trump's body language because he hasn't been speaking. That's something I'm going to have to go back and watch, absolutely.
Once again, President Trump mentioned the issue of the so-called interference of Russia with the American elections.
Just ignore psychopaths who want to kill people if you're in the chat.
Several times, including during our personal context, that the Russian state has never interfered and is not going to interfere into internal American affairs, including the election process. Any specific material, if such things are...
Hold on, I gotta back up just a little bit.
Interfered and is not going, including during our personal context, that the Russian state has never interfered and is not going to interfere into internal American affairs, including the election process.
Okay, Putin literally just denied interfering with the American election process and flatly stated that he will not interfere with the election process. He just gave us his word. Take what you will from it. Think what you want about President Putin. Hold on a second. Let me just... I mean, if you guys really want, if you guys really want to kill me, feel free. It's not going to do shit. I'm not, killing me is not going to do a damn thing for you. It's not going to make you feel better. Shame on you, honestly. Regardless, he is literally admitting that he's not involved, and he won't. He's giving us his word. In public, in front of the news and the world, that he's not going to interfere in elections. That's grounds. He's giving us exactly what we as a country need. You people are adorable. I mean, really, are you really that upset? Are you really that upset that someone disagrees with your manipulated position on politics? Because what we're seeing here is genuinely amazing. We're seeing something that we haven't seen in the world in more than, arguably, more than 100 years. We're seeing the greatest world powers not butting heads and threatening each other with weapons or spies, but rather with negotiation, with the very democratic nature of the world as it should be. And you all want to, and people want to put me in an electric chair. Well, please do so. Make me a martyr for pointing out that we are seeing a better world than we have ever seen. I beg of you to make a martyr of me for pointing that out, because I will not succumb to hysterics about what amounts to a very basic and very political discussion. Yes, Putin is being very prepared and political in his words. He's nowhere near the public speaker Donald Trump is. If you want my blunt opinion, he has to keep his eyes on his notes. He doesn't want to look at the people, not because he's lying, but because he knows these people hate him. And deep down inside, he wants people to like him. Go watch news from Russia about how Putin interacts with people. He loves the praise. But for all the shit that people give Trump for avoiding protesters, Putin genuinely does. Putin stays in a small house out in the woods, away from the world, whenever he gets the chance. He's not a very public figure, and doing this for him, watching him shift back and forth, left leg to right leg, left leg to right leg, shows how uncomfortable he is standing in front of all the news outlets of the world. He doesn't want to do this. And he's saying exactly what the president needs him to say. So we have, as the American people, grounds to sanction him, to take action against him as a sovereign nation or a member of the United Nations, should he go against his word here.
Any specific material, if such things arise, we are ready to analyze together. For instance, we can analyze them through the joint working group on cybersecurity, the establishment of which we discussed during our previous contacts.
Interesting. This seems to be a common thread in everything that they're talking, that everything Putin's saying. He keeps coming back to a joint task force on cybersecurity. For those of you who don't know, Russia has a lot of problems. Oh, this is adorable. Please report me for un-American propaganda. Please do. And in the meanwhile, goodbye, sir. I don't play with Nazis. If you're going to be a Nazi, you're going to get reported and blocked. So, where was I? Hold on, let me skip back just a second. I apologize.
The Joint Working Group on Cybersecurity.
Right. That's something that Putin keeps coming back to. Russia is a place that is packed. Russians are hackers. These days, most hackers are Russians, and most Russians are hackers, it seems. This is a common joke within politics and the intelligence community that Russia is just covered with hackers. This is a problem for Putin, who often gets blamed for the actions of organizations in Russia that are independent hacker groups that are doing damage to Russia, are doing damage to Europe, are doing damage to any number of things. Doing damage to America. I mean, good Lord, if you've been following the news and everything that's been coming out with regards to the investigations, Obama knew back in 2014 and 2015 that the group known as Advanced Persistent Threat 29 attacked our country, and he did nothing. While there is reason to believe Advanced Persistent Threat 29 has FSB connections, there's no evidence, there's no solid evidence of this. And in fact, there's strong reason to believe that APT 29 acts against Russia just as much as it does America, just as much as it does Denmark and the Netherlands. I've spoken about them before, but I misspoke. I was wrong before. APT 29, I mean, I wasn't wrong about their connections to FSB because I still have seen zero evidence. And I mean, I've watched the video feeds that have been leaked from the Netherlands, the intelligence community in the Netherlands, of the people coming and going. And these faces do not match any of the FSB Facebooks of known spies in Russia. These are kids. These are kids who present a serious cyber warfare threat all by themselves. They need to be dealt with. And Russia isn't equipped to deal with them on their own. Putin continually bringing up a joint task force for cyber intelligence and cyber warfare. That's because he needs the Americans' help. He needs Europe's help in solving the cybercrime problem within his own country. These people are terrorists in his world, in his minds. They wreak havoc on his country and his reputation. And much like the rest of Asia, saving face is extremely important to Putin.
The establishment of which we discussed during our previous contacts. And clearly, it's past time we restore our cooperation in the cultural area, in the humanitarian area. As far as I think you know that recently we hosted the American Congressman delegation, and now it's perceived and portrayed almost as a historic event, although it should have been just a current affairs, just business as usual. And in this regard, we mentioned this proposal to the President. We have to think about the practicalities of our cooperation, but also about the rationale, the underlying logic of it. And we have...
Hold on, sorry, I need to step back like 15
Affairs,
seconds.
just business as usual. And in this regard, we mentioned this proposal to the President. We have to think about the practicalities of our cooperation, but also about the rationale, the underlying logic of it. And we have to engage experts on bilateral relationship who know history and the background of our relationship. The idea is to create an expert council that would include political scientists, prominent diplomats and former military experts on both countries who would look for points of contact between the two countries, that would look for ways on putting the relationship on the trajectory of growth. In general, we are glad with the outcome.
Okay, that was very complex and difficult, I suspect, for a lot of people to understand. But it was hilarious because what he's literally describing there is a cultural understanding between the two countries, data about the histories of these countries being shared, and not only shared, but explained by political scientists, by historians, in order to address the need for cultural interaction. But the words he didn't say were business interaction. The only reason you would need this is to promote a cooperative interaction of businesses that do not offend the sensibilities of Americans for being too manipulative, that do not offend the sensibilities of Russians for being too imperialistic and infringing on the sovereignty of Russia. They are talking about actually overcoming that cultural wall that exists between our two superpowers. That is fucking brilliant. They're talking about what absolutely needs to be discussed right now. I'm impressed. I'm genuinely impressed. I really, really want to get to what Donald Trump has to say. This is going to be one of my longest uploads. I'm sorry that I keep looking up like that, but when I start getting thinking, I'm turning my head goes down and the camera's up there. I think I look like a fucking psycho on the camera sometimes. I apologize.
Of our first full-scale meeting, because previously we only had a chance to talk briefly on international fora. We had a good conversation with President Trump, and I hope that we start to understand each other better, and I'm grateful to Donald for it. Clearly, there are some challenges.
Okay, this is just okay. Watch Donald Trump when he says, "I appreciate Donald."
President Trump, and I hope that we start to understand each other better, and I'm grateful to Donald for it. Clearly, there are some
He pauses.
challenges.
He nods his head ever so slightly, and then he faces the audience. It's like, well done. These two men have a first name relationship. Putin was literally just talking about get to know each other better. But clearly, the two men are already starting to get close, in that Putin was willing to call him Donald Trump. And just Donald. Not Mr. Trump, not President Trump, but Donald. The men have met, they've had 4 meetings in total now. They've crossed paths all of 4 times as president, and as far as I know, in Trump's life. And yet, what we have here is the beginnings of mutual respect on a personal level. Not giving in, not giving up, not weakly throwing shit away. No, but a mutual beginnings of respect in which the two men can address each other by their first names.
left when we were not able to clear all the backlog, but I think that we made the first important step in this direction. And in conclusion, I want to point out that this atmosphere of cooperation is something that we are especially grateful for to our Finnish hosts. We're grateful for Finnish people and Finnish leadership for what they've done. I know that we've caused some inconvenience to Finland, and we apologize for it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have just concluded a meeting with President Putin on a wide range of critical issues for both of our countries. We had direct, open, deeply productive dialogue. Went very well. Before I begin, I want to thank President Niinisto.
I need to pause right here and address one thing. You got to pay attention to Trump's adjectives. Trump is all about using the most exaggerated adjective he can. Very well is a very soft adjective for the president. So for me, what that means is, well, it went well. It wasn't groundbreakingly and humongously well done. There's still clearly, from what I can see in the president, just from that alone at least, much more to be done.
Of Finland for graciously hosting today's summit. President Putin and I were saying how lovely it was and what a great job they did. I also want to congratulate Russia and President Putin for having done such an excellent job in hosting the World Cup. It was really one of the best ever, and your team also did very well. It was a great job. I'm here today to continue the proud tradition of bold American diplomacy. From the earliest days of our republic, American leaders have understood that diplomacy and engagement is preferable to conflict and hostility. A productive dialogue is not only good for the United States and good for Russia, but it is good for the world. The disagreements between our two countries are well known, and President Putin and I discussed them at length today. But if we're going to solve many of the problems facing our world, then we're going to have to find ways to cooperate in pursuit of shared interests. Too often in both recent past and long ago, we have seen the consequences when diplomacy is left on the table. We have also seen the benefits of cooperation. In the last century, our nations fought alongside one another in the Second World War. Even during the tensions of the Cold War, when the world looked much different than it does today, the United States and Russia were able to maintain a strong dialogue. But our relationship has never been worse than it is now. However, that changed as of about 4 hours ago.
That's a ballsy statement by the president. Hold on, I want to look at Putin's body language when he says that.
As of about 4 hours ago. I really believe that. Nothing would be easier politically than...
Okay, so Putin sort of agrees with that. He didn't outright disagree. He didn't furrow his brow. He instead lifted his brow. It was almost as if he was surprised to hear the president say that, not because he disagreed, but rather because he is inclined to agree. That's really interesting on Putin's part. Pretty telling. And remember, Putin has to listen through a translator in order to understand what the president is saying. So Putin is waiting. So, you have to wait a couple seconds while the translator in Putin's ear is translating what the president has to say. And then you get that response where he lifts his brow and, that's like Putin. That's basically Putin saying, "Oh, yeah, no, that's true. I'm glad you said that." That's pretty impressive to me.
To refuse to meet, to refuse to engage, but that would not accomplish anything. As president, I cannot make decisions
Did my
on foreign
stream die?
policy in a futile effort to appease partisan critics or the media or Democrats who want to do nothing but resist and obstruct. Constructive dialogue between the United States.
Hold on, I don't know if my stream is actually going. It looks like it froze. I don't see any dropped frames. Alright, so we are still going. Alright. No, Putin does not speak English. Well, he knows a little bit of English, enough, barely enough, but in order for him to understand complex English, he needs a translator. I've never seen Putin without a translator's earpiece, so I'm almost positive he requires the assistance of a translator to comfortably get through English. It's not uncommon. Most world leaders, other than a few European world leaders, namely Levin in Sweden, some of the upper members of the German parliaments, Emmanuel Macron, most world leaders don't speak English. They're too old. When they were kids, English wasn't a standard taught language at that time.
In Russia for the opportunity to open new pathways toward peace and stability in our world. I would rather take a political risk in pursuit of peace than to risk peace in pursuit of politics. As president, I will always put what is best for America and what is best for the American people. During today's meeting, I addressed directly with President Putin the issue of Russian interference in our elections.
Here we go.
I felt this was a message best delivered in person. Spent a great deal of time talking about it, and President Putin may very well want to address it, and very strongly, because he feels very strongly about it, and he has an interesting idea. We also discussed
hold on. So Putin actively said, I didn't interfere with your election and I will not interfere with your election. And then Trump says, these two men are implying that the election interference may have had nothing to do with the Kremlin itself, but rather rogue cyber criminal elements who are operating. I mean, this is something that there's a long thread that's going through this entire discussion that I'm hearing, that I'm noticing. Not all KGB agents had to learn English. That's not entirely standard. If you can get away with the use of a translator, you can get away with the use of a translator. As far as his age, I believe he's 66, something in that range, 61. I can't remember off the top of my head. I mean, even if he was well-trained, even if he was educated in like a year of English, the nuance of the differences between the Russian language and the English language are quite distinct, and it's worth having a translator around who can give you that kind of nuance. Honestly, I felt let down by CBS's translator, because even I know just enough Russian to see where he was fucking things up, which is why I was doing my best to pause and re-listen to it. But Trump and Putin are putting forth that without disrespecting Russia, which would be a terrible thing for Trump to do for the sake of Putin's saving face, they're actively stating that there are rogue cybercriminal elements within Russia that need to be dealt with, that need to be solved. And don't worry about stupid questions. It's quite fine. Please ask them.
Critical challenges facing humanity, nuclear proliferation. I provided an update on my meeting
so
last
hot in
month
here, by the way. I'm sorry
with
if I'm
Chairman
sweating.
Kim on the denuclearization of North Korea. And after today, I am very sure that President Putin and Russia want very much to end that problem, going to work with us, and I appreciate that commitment.
Awesome.
The President and I also discussed the scourge of radical Islamic terrorism. Both Russia and the United States have suffered horrific terrorist attacks, and we have agreed to maintain open communication between our security agencies to protect our citizens from this global menace. Last year, we told Russia about...
Okay, there's two of them. There's the two of them confirming that they want open communication. They want a joint effort between the intelligence communities in order to address the problem of Islamic terrorism. They're both openly stating that. They're both agreeing on that bluntly and completely. And that's extremely fucking important. I mean, it has dangerous ramifications if done poorly. It's something that's going to have to be done with extreme care. But if done right, we could be seeing a new age in competitive, cooperative interaction between the two world superpowers.
A planned attack in St. Petersburg, and they were able to stop it cold. They found them, they stopped them, there was no doubt about it. I appreciated President Putin's phone call afterwards to thank me. I also emphasized the importance of placing pressure on Iran to halt its nuclear ambitions and to stop its campaign of violence throughout the area.
There's Trump showing respect to Russia for handling the mullahs for us with regards to nuclear proliferation in Iran. He's addressing this very respectfully. This is really good shit.
Throughout the Middle East. As we discussed at length, the crisis in Syria is a complex one. Cooperation between our two countries has the potential to save hundreds of thousands of lives. I also made clear that the United States will not allow Iran to benefit from our successful campaign against ISIS. We have just about eradicated ISIS in the area. We also
These are all
agreed that
topics you've heard me
representatives
talk
from
about
our
before.
national security councils will meet to follow up on all of the issues we addressed today and to continue the progress we have started right here in Helsinki. Today's meeting is only the beginning of a longer process, but we have taken the first steps toward a brighter future, and one with a strong dialogue and a lot of thought. Our expectations are grounded in realism, but our hopes are grounded in America's desire for friendship, cooperation, and peace. And I think I can speak on behalf of Russia when I say that also. President Putin, I want to thank you again for joining me for these...
Hold on. Putin just furrowed his brow and looked down, grabbed his pen. When Trump said, I think we can speak, I can speak for Russia on that also. Friendship, cooperation, and peace. I'm going to have to go back through this after I'm done streaming, absolutely. Because there are a few details that need to be sussed out of this.
These important discussions and for advancing open dialogue between Russia and the United States. Our meeting carries on a long tradition of diplomacy between Russia, the United States, for the greater good of all. And this was a very constructive day. This was a very constructive few hours that we spent together. It's in the interest of both of our countries to continue our conversation, and we have agreed to do so. I'm sure we'll be meeting again in the future, often, and hopefully we will solve every one of the problems that we discussed today. So Again, President Putin, thank you very much.
Okay, I'm not going to go through the question and answers portion of the of what we've got of the discussion because that's going to be a lot more complex. That's going to require me to do an actual video on the subject. Instead, I'm going to end it here. But we got some really fascinating information out of this. More than anything else is the fact that this is an ongoing dialogue. Not everything was solved today, but a lot of concerns were addressed, and we are seeing diplomacy, we are seeing debate, and even argument with Russia, disagreement and agreement, not being handled at the end of a gun or at the threat of a nuclear launch, but rather in representing a new age of discourse between two otherwise long opposed enemies. This is a good thing. This is a very good thing. And I really hope Donald Trump is right when he says that though our relationship with Russia is the worst it's ever been, it's improved as of 4 hours ago, or 6 or 7 hours ago now. I really hope that's the case, because we deserve a world that doesn't live under the fear of our two nations destroying each other. Dialogue is wonderful. Thank you, by the way, for sticking with me this entire time. I realize this was a much longer stream than I usually do, but you all are absolutely wonderful, and I apologize for my immune system is a little compromised right now. So when a cat scratches me on the face, it's not going away, and I don't have any concealer right now that I can use to cover it up. So I apologize for my ugly nose, and I thank you for sticking with me. If you missed any part of this, it will be uploaded on my YouTube channel here in a couple hours, and it will be broadcast on all the social media when it does. Please do follow me on Twitter, on Gab, on Minds. If you have me on Twitter, send me a DM if you want to join my Discord, so you can talk to me directly. I'm starting to use that as a place where I just vent my thoughts about things, try and start discussions there. Please do join me there. And yeah, if you want to support the work I do, there are many ways you can do that. I'm actually working on setting up a CoinHive miner that you can leave open in your web browser if you'd like, in order to, with your spare cycles of your computer, mine Monero for me if you want. I mean, entirely up to you. I'm going to be mining it too with my spare cycles, but yeah, these are things that I'm developing. They're still in the works, but I thought I'd let you know. Until then, until next time, I will catch you hopefully tomorrow. Hopefully I'm able to do a stream tomorrow, even if it's just me talking shit. I'll see you then. Bye.